Wade back here with you again, High Noon Leatherworks, for another leather adventure. In this episode, we're going to continue the guitar strap, and we're going to do a little bit more stamping on it before we end up going into some dies and maybe doing the measuring for the straps that we have to attach to the main part. So come on in and let's get started. Today we're going to do a little bit more stamping to this. In the last episode we did all the bevel stamping that kind of made everything pop and come up to feel like 3D. And then today we're going to do a little pear shading. This is a pear shader, and it's got little tiny dimples on it, and it's shaped like a pear. And what that will do is that'll give us some more definition, and on the background part of the water, I think we'll do a little bit of that pear shading. So just like last episode, before we do some stamping, we'll do some casing. And again, anytime I case my leather, I don't want to get it soaking wet. I just want to get it damp. And once I get it nice and damp, then we'll wait a few minutes and let that start to come back to its natural color. And depending on how warm it is where you're working, sometimes it doesn't take very long for that to come back. This one is already coming back pretty quick. You can see right here. So we'll let this continue to come back to its natural color, and as soon as that happens, we'll go ahead and we'll take our mallet and our pear shader, and I'm just going to start very lightly, and I want to see what kind of effect I get. Obviously, I've got so many hours in this project already, I'd hate to make a catastrophic mistake and ruin this whole project. So I'll take the pear shader, I'll start down here at the bottom around this water edge, and I don't want to hit it too hard because I don't want to mess up my 3D effect. I don't want to smash down all the leather. So I'm just trying to give it a little bit of definition in the water. And you'll notice I'm not hitting my mallet, swinging my mallet really hard. And I'm definitely not getting it close to my artwork, like the catfish and the frog. You know, I don't want my pear shading on that. I just want it on the water itself. And you can turn the pear shader at an angle a little bit, and it'll push the leather and give it some definition. So by angling it, you're going to get different effects. take my pear shader when I'm trying to get some depth and some definition to it, and I like to turn it as I'm tapping it, and that kind of gives me some different angles of the pear shader so that I'm not going all one direction. Plus, by turning it at an angle, I can get into a lot tighter spots. Again, I got to be very careful. I don't want to get into my frog or my fish. And this is giving me the effect that I want. Instead of just having the plain lines that have been beveled and carved, now it really gives me that 3D effect, because I'm trying not to hit my edges with my pear shader. I want to stay away from them, so I keep those raised. I'm only shading in the heavier parts, and by keeping the pear shader moving as I'm doing this, it's really giving it some nice movement. And so it, instead of just a solid leather on the water part as it comes down the waterfall, I can give it some different depths just by moving my pear shader around. As I'm tapping, you can tell some of it I spin them around depending on how tight of an area I'm in. Now when I get up here into this waterfall area, let me show you what I've got so far and what this pear shader's doing. Here's an area that has not been pear shaded. This is the waterfall. You can see the trees, the duck. And then now you can start to see down here, you can start to see this pear shader in the background and what that's done to really make that pop and look nice. So just a little bit of effort on something like that, instead of just leaving it plain like this side. This is what it looked like, just plain, just flat leather, and it still looks like water, but now with the pear shader stamping tool, now look at it, it really gives it some depth and definition. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue up the waterfall with the pear shader, but I'm going to turn it, instead of going side to side, I'm going to turn it and I'm going to go up and down with the waterfall and try to give it more movement of a vertical feel. And again, I'm not trying to flatten out all the leather. That would be defeating the purpose of all the steps I've done up to this point. All I'm trying to do is give it a little bit of detail and definition. And you can see I can do that too vertically by lifting up my pear shader as I work it down the waterfall, and what that does is it moves it, and with each hit it's a little bit different on depth and how hard I'm coming down, because I don't pick it up exactly the same every time. So what that does is that changes my darkness and depth of my pear shading so that it doesn't look uniformed. You don't want like a uniform pattern. So take a look at the side that has not been pear shaded. There's the waterfall. And take a look at the side that I just finished the pear shading on. So you can see how much depth and definition and detail that pear shading, just that little touch, that little bit of work, how that really made that pop. Here's before, and here's after. So it's really starting to look like a picture now, instead of just like a drawing, because we're getting so much detail in it. I think I will do just a little bit. I'm going to take this backgrounding tool and it has some little dimples on it also, and I'm going to do just a little bit of backgrounding, and I mean a little bit, just very lightly on the clouds. Again, it'll give it just a little bit of detail and not make the clouds look like it's just a flat piece of artwork. And kind of like with the pear shader, I can move it around, turn it, angle it, and it gives me different depths. So instead of just trying to make a standard pattern, I can keep moving it around, twisting it, changing the angles. And what that does is it gives me some shadows on that. So there's without the backgrounding tool, and there's with the backgrounding tool. So you can see all it does is give it just a little bit of detail. So that side's complete. That's finished as far as my stamping and my carving. So we'll turn this around. We'll case this end, and I'll try to duplicate, which this is the key. That makes it kind of difficult when you have the same piece of artwork on both sides, and now you're into doing some detailed stamping, is to get both sides to look the same. So that definitely makes it a little more difficult. You just have to try to replicate exactly what you did on the other end. So I'll go back to my pear shader, and remember, I got to keep this in mind. I was doing it horizontally until I got up to the waterfall. Then I turned it vertically, so it made it look like the water's flowing down the waterfall, and then once it hits the bottom, then it starts moving side to side, so it's not all flowing like just down a river, like it pools up. So I'll finish this half using the pear shader and the backgrounding tool on the clouds, and then I'll come back. Alright, so that's both sides completed with the backgrounding tool for the clouds, and then the pear shader for the waterfall and the water. So I didn't do anything more to the catfish or the frog or the duck. So the animals themselves, all I did was carve them. I traced them out, I carved them, and then I beveled them to make them pop. So now that I've got my background stuff done with my pear shading, you can see that it really looks nice. And you get that flow of the water, makes it really look like it's flowing over the side. So it's really pretty. So the next thing we'll do is we'll go ahead and get our dye on here, and I think we may do a two-tone. We've got to do the straps that attach to the top and the bottom. So this will have a strap on it that'll come down, a narrower strap that'll come down and actually hook to the back of the guitar. Then this side will have a strap down here that'll be a little narrower that will come down, and it'll have a buckle on it, so it'll be a two-piece and have holes in it so that it's adjustable, and that'll hook to the neck of the guitar. So I'm not sure if I want to go ahead and do the die next or measure for the straps. I think I'll do the die, and I think I'll do this in some type of tan, and then do the straps that I'm going to attach here and here in black, so that we'll have a contrasting strap, and I think that'll look nice. So we'll do a tan. Let me get rid of this granite and get my stained up die cardboard down here. Let me widen out. And then as always, now some of you may think, hey, you cased that several minutes ago to do your stamping. What's that moisture that's left in that leather, is that going to affect? And what I found with that is yeah, it does affect it somewhat, but it kind of gives it a unique antique look to it when you put the die on. So let me get a disposable cup here, and I want to go, let's see, we got light brown. I'm trying to figure out what would look really good with black. I have another light brown. Let's do light brown and see what we end up with. And obviously you can always go darker. Oh yeah. This is going to look real good with black. And the wool dauber really lets you get down into those grooves. Of where you've done your carving and your beveling and your stamping. And you notice when I come back, my next step, I overlap those about 2 to 3 inches, and then I feather that in best I can so that you don't have light, dark, light, dark. And again, the key when you're dyeing something that's been carved, stamped, beveled, is make sure that you get plenty of dye on there. And what I'll do is, as soon as I get this dyed real good, I'll take a microfiber cloth and I'll buff all that excess off. Let's see what kind of look that's going to give us. So I'll let that dye stand on there. Take a microfiber cloth, start buffing this. Now, light brown I've found lightens up tremendously as it dries. So as the dye air dries, it will lighten up, and some of the areas that were carved and stamped may end up coming out looking almost like a two-tone, like a brown and burgundy color. So we'll let this dry a little bit while we do the sides, the edges, and the back, and then we'll be able to see what it's going to end up. Give it an idea. Like I said, this light brown lightens up a lot as it dries. And normally you don't get to see the final look of it until the next day. So it takes a few hours for it to dry real well. But we'll be able to see if it's gonna dry enough to lighten up and change color from this darker. That's like kind of my rule of thumb on dye, is if you definitely don't want to go too dark, you don't want to get your dye too dark, then always go a shade lighter on the color than what you think you're going to need or use. And you can always take a scrap piece of leather and do a sample area. That's probably a great idea, so that you get an idea what that's going to look like before you go ahead and do your entire project, and then go, oh wow, that's way darker than what I was expecting. Because you get to this point in a project, you definitely don't want to ruin it by using the wrong color dye. And like I said, I probably would not, I would have went with a saddle tan or something like that if it wasn't for the fact that I've used this light brown before. And when I first started using it, it was one of those shockers that it was like, oh wow, that's way too dark, much too dark than what I want. But again, as it dried, then it lightened up, so it turned out to be just fine as far as the color went. So finish up the back side here and flip it over and put the rough side down so the front of it can dry real good. And I will go over the back side here just to take off any excess and smooth that leather down a little bit while it's damp. So we'll let that set overnight, and that you can see there's already some spots that are starting to become lighter, especially in the ends here and some in the carving area. But look at the depth and detail that we got out of that. You can see some lighter spots in the waterfall. But that's just going to turn out really nice. So we'll put this on the cardboard, and I like to put it on the edge. That way both sides get plenty of air as it dries. And I think we'll end it here today. So there's our next step. We got pretty far as this episode. Got a couple of things done. Got some stamping done. Got some background stamping done. The detail. We've got our die on the main piece. So when we come back next time, that'll allow us to move on to actually manufacturing the other pieces that go with this project. And then that way we can start winding this project down. I know it's been several episodes, but this is a pretty detailed project, so it does take quite a bit of time. So thanks for coming, thanks for watching, I appreciate it. And please, like I always say, like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.